All right, I'm at the Red House with Chris McGinnis, and lucky to catch y'all while you're in town for some music at Gas Hill tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming by
Thanks for
and
having
doing
me,
this.
man. Thank you very much. This is exciting.
I'm glad to get to talk to you.
Thank you. Yeah, likewise.
As I was just embarrassing you with privately, your friends here who came, they're playing with you tonight, told me that you're one of the best songwriters in North Carolina, if not the best.
I don't know about that. I only keep people around who say that. That's my trick.
It's a good rule to live by.
Yeah.
But since that is the story that was told to me, I'm looking forward to talking to you about songwriting and specifically your songwriting,
Sure.
your songs. So, as I hate to run the risk of anything cliche or predictable or anything like that, but every songwriter has their own, interesting little unique way to talk about the craft and the way that they approach it and the way that they understand it. And so, at the risk of asking you questions that I'm sure other people have already asked you throughout your time as an artist, I'll probably ask you some of those. Starting with, I'd like to know where your relationship with music really began.
I mean, probably just as a little kid. For the longest time, it was just like Elvis and the Beatles. My mom just had a few CDs that she'd just pop in the car whenever we were driving around. Most of the time, it was like the Beatles' #1 hits album, and I don't know. I guess I seriously started really listening to music when I was 8 or 9, maybe. Didn't become like an actual musician till 12, 13, 14, something like that.
That's a pretty early start.
Yeah, I guess so. It was weird. I kind of felt behind because a lot of my friends had just started playing instruments like just right when they were really young and came up through it. But yeah, I don't know. And I've always enjoyed writing. I think maybe that's where I came through it because I was writing songs before I was a musician. I don't know. I just have always enjoyed like creating with words. I guess, just the power of words.
Did your relationship with writing start with writing songs, or did it start somewhere else?
Somewhere else. So, like, just the elementary school I came up through, um, third, fourth, and fifth grade, we had to do this thing called the speech contest or whatever, and it was just like to work on our public speaking skills. And there were categories. I mean, you could, when we were really young, you could memorize a Dr. Seuss book, or you could memorize like a passage out of the Bible or something, or you could write your own speech or whatever. And my feelings on it was just a lot easier to memorize words that I made up and a lot more interesting. So I would always just take the write my own stuff approach from that. And I don't know, it was just fun. It was just a fun way to express myself in a way that I thought, I don't know, I don't want to say that I thought I was good at, but just a way that I enjoyed.
Being good at it is okay too. It's really funny that is a starting point for you that you remember, because in fifth grade, I remember one of the some of the early signs that I was interested in writing were around fifth grade, around like essay writing for class and stuff. But then there was a dare. We had to write essays about dare, and I remember in fifth grade that was like the first time I won something related to writing. Was my essay on dare class was selected, and I had to read it in front of the student body and shit like that.
Nice. That's funny. I won in 8th grade, I think, but only because I was the only one in the original category. So that was another perk that year, I think. Is like I recognized, like, if I just wrote something, I'd be a shoe-in for a free day out of school to go do whatever the next level was.
Which sounds like a valuable lesson too about the niche of being original,
I think so, yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, and that year it was also just like I wrote like a collection of just like nonsense stories and poems, like like Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll. I just kind of was like, let's just stand up here for 10 minutes and spout off a bunch of literal just nonsense and then be handed like a plaque
Damn.
for it. Yeah, that was just for amusement, I think. Which, yeah, I guess that's how it
Yeah.
should be, maybe. Just for you.
It might be what we're
Yeah,
still doing.
if I don't enjoy it, I'm not going to do
Hell
it.
yeah. So, okay. Are you, while it's on my mind, are you also like a reader?
Yeah.
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 Like
I
an
try, I
avid
mean, I
reader?
try to be. I found that it goes hand in hand. If I'm not actively like reading and working through like books, I don't, if I don't have a lot going in, I'm not going to have a lot coming out,
I hear that.
Yeah.
So, okay. So it sounds like from an early, like that's an interesting groundwork to have gotten you sort of relating to the skill of writing. And then I'm assuming that somewhere along the way you picked up a guitar and the two just kind of fell in together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, again, like I was writing songs before I was playing guitar. They weren't good, but I just was just, again, just, I think it all started with the Beatles. I was just enthralled by the magic of that music, and I wanted to be able to create songs like that.
Hmm.
And then it got to a point where I was like, hey, I'd be a lot better at writing songs if I knew how to play an instrument. So yeah, I picked up my mom's like old guitar that was just sitting around the house. She got it when she was a kid, never really learned how to play. It came to our house because my sister went through a phase where she wanted to play but just didn't. And I don't know, I just thought now's the time, let's just do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I started with like classical lessons. They're like $25 at the community center a month, something stupid cheap like that, and just learning like flamenco guitar, and that's how I learned the basics enough to keep at it.
Hell yeah. So with the Beatles, do you remember? Was it the sonic elements, or was it the melodic elements, or was it the lyrical?
I mean, it was kind of all three, which is weird because I think now like they're still like my favorite group, and maybe one of my bigger influences. But like I don't listen to them for the lyrics very much now.
Hmm.
But yeah, it kind of had it all for me, like just the melodies and like just the weird stuff they were able to do with like 4 tracks, back then. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
it's just they got it all, I guess.
I didn't. It's really interesting to me that from a young age you were interested in the Beatles because I wasn't even exposed to the Beatles really. I was fortunate to have the freedom to explore a lot of music stuff, but I didn't really explore the Beatles until I was probably like 16, 17, something like that. And I still didn't lean all the way in. Like a lot of it didn't make sense to me. So the fact that you, I don't know, like that it hooked you from a young age, I find that, I bet that's kind of rare or interesting or something.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
Were you
I
around
think
other people that were your age that liked the Beatles?
um yeah, I had some friends, a couple of friends. Um I don't know. I just feel like when you're that young, like there's like I mentioned earlier, like Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland, that type of writing, I feel like um is kind of similar to their stuff.
Mm.
It's especially like more of their psychedelic eras, like the "I Am the Walrus" type lyrics and "Strawberry Fields," and it's like you know, I don't know. I don't know. It's just kind of a mystical sort of thing to me. It's like I don't know what they're talking about, but it's a good vibe. you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And just the inherent silliness of it all, I think.
That sounds like the total opposite of my essay about Dare and how you shouldn't do drugs.
Oh. Yeah, yeah.
The foundation of our writing careers is very different. No, that's great though. And so and before we move on, Elvis too though, like another one that I
Yeah, this
just
is another one just as a little kid, just the big personality, and I don't know. It was just amusing. It was
yeah,
just very different from anything in my immediate like circle, you know.
hell
I
yeah.
just really gravitated towards Hound Dog and Devil in Disguise, and I don't know, it just like as a little kid it just appealed to me.
So as you were becoming a songwriter and this is one of those areas where I'm sure like there's a lot of common ground between songwriters. Like we all start out probably thumbing like fumbling through the process and kind of getting better at it over time. And I wonder I was like looking at some of your discography. It looked like you've been putting stuff out for a while. When would you say is the stuff on Spotify? Is that all stuff that you would say is sort of like maybe representative of where you're at now, or can you identify vast differences in your progression throughout the time that you've been putting out music to the world?
Yeah, for sure. Um, a lot of what I listen to, I get, like I said, a lot of what goes in influences kind of what comes out. Um, my oldest song on Spotify was one that I wrote before I really understood much music theory or whatever, and it was just a few. It was like a 1-4-5 with like minor two, minor six thrown in there in the bridge, but not really knowing what those were. And it was a lot more just like kind of a folky Tom Petty era sort of song because that's just the music I was listening to and really deep into when I wrote that song. And a lot of, I guess, on my latest album, there's like some stuff I learned like studying music in school I've been able to incorporate. I don't know, it just kind of grows and changes as I discover new things. I'm not interested really in sticking to a niche.
Mm.
I try really hard, and this is probably why. I mean, over the course of 5 years, I've got less than 20 songs online. I think, just because I'm not interested in. I try really hard not to write the same song twice.
Mm.
If that makes sense. I don't know. I probably strayed away from your question a
No,
good
no,
bit.
you're right on it. You're doing great.
But yeah, it definitely it's yeah, I try hard to make things different each time, but in a way that interests me, you know, in a way that feels natural, I guess.
I'm kind of yeah. I'm. There's something about that I'm trying to figure out exactly what the question is, how to formulate the question, and I think it's just mostly about. I mean, you're telling me that this is something that's important to you. Something about not writing the same song twice, not recreating the same thing over and over, and it sounded like also not creating a situation where you're just doing. I don't know, where you as an artist are the same all the time. Where like I guess do you have any understanding about how that stuff became important to you? When did you decide I don't want to write the same song over and over?
I don't know. I think it's just kind of just how I've always felt about it. Like I just want to be able to I, I want everything to kind of just be unique in its own way. You know, if that makes sense. It's just part of it for me.
Mm,
It's not. It wasn't really like a. I want to approach my artistry this way. It's just that that's how it is for me. I think.
just naturally kind of occurred that way.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So another piece of that also sounded a little it sparked my curiosity a little bit was the coming in going out thing. How do you that sounds like pretty interesting. That sounds like you're fueling your own creativity, experiencing other people's creativity and shit like that. Um, how does that affect where you are creatively? Like, do you see any direct impact, or when you're like kind of immersing yourself in Tom Petty or reading Lewis Carroll? Is that what is it like? I guess in terms of what that is doing with your creativity.
Um. I guess it almost. I don't know. It helps me find a different approach. Like what I want to say when I'm writing something is going to be what I want to say, but it's maybe here's a template to approach how to say it, sort of, I guess. Like on my latest album, I think Randy Newman and Warren Zevon, as far as like the way they wrote, were big influences on me. In that they're really good at character writing,
Mm.
writing from perspectives that aren't necessarily their own, certainly not autobiographical type songs. So maybe the content and the message of the song is something that's important to them personally and what they want to say, but it's being told from a really off the wall angle, kind of, which was something that I kind of took an approach to. I was like, with this album, I do have feelings that I want to express, and like I want this song to give off this sort of feeling, but that's a really interesting way that these guys are doing that, you know. So maybe from that angle, or maybe I can approach it from that angle in a way that's interesting and not just like an album of me, kind of, you know. Did that hit what you were
Yeah, yeah,
asking?
yeah. I'm just thinking, man. Yeah, sounds like okay. So does that suggest then that like there's a? It sounds like what I'm getting from that is just kind of identifying some of the value that you might have witnessed from Randy Newman or the other name I actually didn't recognize that you
Warren
said.
Zevon,
Yeah, I don't know that one.
Werewolves of London.
Oh, gotcha.
That's like probably his most popular, but oh man,
I only know that
I could go
song.
on and on about Zevon. He's got so many good albums and just like crazy songs. And he's killer.
Crazy in a similar family to the Werewolves of London thing.
Yeah, kind of like what's one? I'm trying to think of a good example. There's the hockey song is one off of it's not The Wind, I don't think. It's one of the last albums he put out, My Rides Here. It's like an 8-minute epic story about a kid in Canada who wants to be a star hockey player, but he's only good at being a defensive player. So he wants to score, but he's only allowed to beat people up. And it's
Wow.
like, where do you know, and like, it's like an 8-minute long crazy song with like weird like arrangements and pieces. And like, I don't know. It's called "Hit Somebody," the hockey song, and the chorus is just like "Hit somebody," like do what you're here for. But at the same time, there's that feeling of like a dude wanting so badly to be something more than what he is, and like it's a very relatable message told from like a weird narrative.
Yeah, that's when you brought up.
Zevon's wild.
Yeah, even with Werewolves in London, like that song, long story with a that's very specific, like uniquely specific in what it's about. And of course, it's like kind of whimsical and fun and stuff and memorable, but yeah, distant from the self, which is interesting, especially because like I don't know if it's a young artist thing or if it's just like a perspective, but there's a very romantic idea about songwriters that every word you write is just like basically a journal entry of yourself. And I guess what you're talking about is sort of an approach to writing that's very separate from being limited by one's direct experiences and kind of going into the realm of character writing and ideas that are told in this way, delivered in this way that aren't limited to your direct experiences, which I can see value in. But yeah, I wonder if to I guess to package that as a question or whatever, it's like I noticed the difference in that, and I the question is something like, damn it, what is the question? The question is something like given that alternative perspective or the expectation that songwriters might, basically write diary entries, have you run into people who are surprised when you write songs from a different perspective like that, from a distant perspective?
I suppose so. Yeah, I mean, Jack has talked about that. Jack Marion, when we're hanging out, how he's, I don't know how it. Yeah, it's just like people don't write. I don't want to say that. People like, you're definitely right. There's a lot of songwriting that is just journal entries, and I just want to be a storyteller. I think, and that is kind of different, I guess, from what a lot of people are led to. And I mean, it's not something exact, you know. I think that confessional writing is easy to it is I don't want to say easy. It's alluring. Maybe there's definitely some merit to that, and to be able, you definitely have to be honest in your writing. Um, but it's just personally not an area that interests me. And also, like, I can, you know, it feels limiting.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm just writing about myself all the time, I'm gonna run out of stuff pretty quickly. Because I'm 26 years old and I've just been a student for most of my life.
Yeah.
You know, and there's so many more perspectives out there beyond the one that I have. You know, why I don't want to stick to the one.
It's a pretty honest thing to say,
Yeah,
especially the student part. Like, no one's people don't typically say that about themselves, but it is true about youth. You know.
yeah. I mean, my girlfriend and I were talking about somebody who like died right out of college, and that's just the saddest thought to me. Because like for me, a lot of what I've been doing, I've felt like all through high school and college, it's like doing what people have told me I need to do to be successful. And they say, hey man, you go to college, just get that piece of paper, and it means a whole lot more than not getting it. So, you know, I put certain things on the back burner that I want to do so I can go through college and get that paper. Graduated in the spring of 2020. That paper hasn't done anything for me in 3 years. Uh, it's just like, you know, you spend so much of your life going through the school system doing what, or at least for me, doing what people have told you is what's going to work out for you. And it's ultimately maybe not always the case.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've acknowledged, and I took an extra year in college. I studied 5 years for a 4-year degree. So on top of that, like, again, I've just spent a lot of my time, and then we factor in, you know, 2020, the first 2020, 2021, 2022 are all pretty limiting in what I could do once I finally was out of school and into the real world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just recognize that I've not done anything. Well, I don't want to say that there's been a lot of time put towards stuff that I don't really value.
Yeah.
You know. And all that being said, if I'm trying to write songs that a lot of people hear and like, I can't just write about sitting in school not doing anything. It's just not a fun thing to sing about. It's not interesting.
Absolutely. Damn, man. What'd you go to school for?
So I did my first 2 years at UNC Asheville. I was in their jazz and contemporary program with a creative writing minor, and just didn't really like the scene. I kind of, by the end of that, hated picking up my instrument, and I was like, this is a problem. So I transferred to App and swapped the two, became a creative writing major and a music minor, and finished out with that.
That feel better for your instrument relationship?
Absolutely.
I can totally wrap my head around that. When I was doing some manual labor jobs, I noticed that it made me make more music. And when I was like,
Yeah.
sometimes the more pressure I put on it, that's like all I do is music, the less musically productive I feel.
Yeah. Holy cow, man. Yeah, I've been doing like sort of desk job stuff since I got out of college, and I'm really thankful for the job I have now because I'm just working with a friend and it allows me flexibility. But I do miss like I worked at like a campground for 10 years. It was like a summer job in my hometown when I was in high school, and then I didn't go to college very far away from home, so I just kept that job. And it was not a lot of manual labor, but more like just active work. And I definitely wrote more songs back then than I do now, I think, or at least, more songs kind of popped up
I think it's
back then when I was just doing stuff with my hands.
Yeah, I think it's the hands component helps a lot to have something that's tactile like that. But I think also like, yeah, I think it helps your brain a ton
Yeah.
to like be on a regiment and to have to do shit like that you don't necessarily want to do, but sometimes you got to like break a sweat and stuff. I think it just your brain opens up to the world the way that it's sort of supposed to, and for me, I find that it does induce more creativity.
Yeah, for sure.
With this writing degree, do you see? I'm sure. I mean, obviously, that must play some role in your songwriting and benefit it. Is that? Do you see yourself being a different kind of writer than a songwriter, or is it mainly to serve
No.
that?
No, I mean, like, I had to do all sorts of, I'm experimenting with different forms. Um, Prose, fiction, and nonfiction. I was actually better at the nonfiction than the fiction, um, which is kind of funny because I do like story songs a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But it was always, and I was always very open with myself about it. And like, even my professors, I'm like, I'm here in this writing class to learn how to be a better songwriter. I want to be able to pull in literary elements and tools, I guess, into my songs so that it's not just random. I don't know. I really value lyrics in songs. And so I felt it was a lot more beneficial to come from a creative writing education than a strictly music education for that reason.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but even the prose writing and the poetry writing, it was all in service of learning things that I could then put into songwriting. I did a little bit of like sort of literary journalism stuff, and I enjoy writing feature articles. And if I had my way, if I could, get paid to do that and make a good living, I would. But it's hard to make money in that area too. Yeah, but overall, it's all just in service of the song.
You think you'll ever write a book or anything?
I don't know. I as long as really, as long as I'm happy writing songs, like
It's enough.
that's it. I think they say everybody has one book in them, and I'll get premises maybe for like short stories or like an idea for like a novel or something maybe, but a lot of times it's like let's just make that a song,
Yeah.
and that's where that goes because that's just really what I enjoy doing.
Yeah, I get it. So, oh shit. Oh, so I was going to ask you that there's a very, I guess, different process when somebody sits down to write a book, or prose, or to fill up a space with a bunch of prose, essays, poems, and songwriting. And of course, all of those have their own. Each writer has a different approach to all of those. It's not like there's one way. And I'm wondering if, given that it sounds like probably our approaches to songwriting are probably very different, and probably is true for your approach compared to everybody else's, where would you say a song starts to be born? Like what, you can take any of the songs off of your latest release if you want, and you can tell me the stories of those if you want, but more so than just like when you started to sit down and write it, I'm wondering where these premises, where these things, like how these things sort of begin for you.
Um, it's different a lot of the times. I kind of collect words, if I'm reading and there's like a name or like a phrase or something, like I'll write that down, or maybe something will come to my, I'm just out experiencing and observing, and something, a phrase or a title or a chorus comes to my head, and I just plop that down. And maybe if I'm trying to sit down to write, I've at least, without anything specific in mind, I've at least got like a pile of stuff I can refer to.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times, it just kind of comes. I don't know where it comes from, but a lot of times I'll just have like a melody in my head, and naturally, there's a word or two that comes with it, and it's usually what ends up being the title or the chorus or the tag or whatever, and I just try to build around that. Um, and sometimes in that process, like I think about what that title is, what it means. Usually the melody and the chords kind of come after that before I have any words, and it's just kind of what feeling is coming out of this melody and these chords. How does that tie to maybe the line or two that I have? Where can I take it from there? And when I'm drawing blanks, that's when I turn to the pile of words that I'm always nesting away. Other times it's like, hey, here is just a thought or a premise or a story that just either somebody I see or something I see makes me think about that. And it's like, how can I turn, this might be an interesting idea for a song. And, then I write down that premise in my pile of words and maybe get something, maybe I don't. It's like fishing sometimes. And if I'm one of those where like I can't write really without inspiration, but I can't sit around and wait for inspiration. So it's like trying to cultivate a headspace and trying to cultivate a life that is constantly inspiring, maybe, or in a mindset or a lifestyle that's inviting to that stuff. Because ultimately, the very beginning, it's really just stuff that pops up, And I wish I knew where it was, and I wish I knew how to tap that well better. But
That is I really like where you landed there. A lifestyle that sounds like facilitates or allows for that space for inspiration. What do you think is important to that lifestyle? Like, what is, how do you know what sort of belongs there and what doesn't?
well, for me, I mean, it's different for everybody, I guess. But for me, a lot of it is just being active, appreciating quiet. I try not to have podcasts or music or noise or TV on in the background just to have it on, because that just puts me in a very passive type of mindset, I guess, and that's not a great place for trying to write. you know, yeah, being active and listening and observing is what works for me, and being able to change up routines sometimes, doing something outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Just little kind of things, I think.
Hell yeah.
But just trying to live intentionally. And that's something with working in Raleigh, most weeks, 40-hour work week, and then you factor in the commute, you factor in having to do laundry and cooking dinner and whatever else. Like, my time is a lot more limited, weirdly, than it was when I was in college for a little bit. And so I recognize, like, it's really easy to go a month without writing anything if I'm not paying attention. So just, being very intentional about creating that headspace and that lifestyle, I think.
Yeah. You've mentioned observation a few times. What does it say about sort of the role of what songwriting is, that observation of the outside world is such a significant part of what fuels the song? Is the song a reflection? Are you a detective? Are you a reporter? Like, what is the value, I guess, of the outside world fueling some of those aspects of songwriting?
Well, I mean, everybody I'm singing to is in the outside world. So if I'm only singing about my own personal internal world, I can't imagine it's going to be very interesting or helpful to anyone.
I like that answer.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
like, again, it's just like I'm not. It's just fun. My one of my first writing courses I took, it was the professor Catherine Min. She stressed how it's important to recognize writing for yourself and writing for an audience. Like, it's good to do those therapeutic journal entries, but if you're expecting someone to read what you're writing or listen to what you're singing, you shouldn't just have yourself in mind. And I mean, that being said, like, I do write songs. It's all for my own enjoyment, really. But part of that enjoyment is being able to reach other people. So it's cooperative. So that outside world's important for that.
That too feels like another one of those like myths about artistry. Is like a myth that we sometimes always live. Is sort of, I do this for me, and it's all about me, and it's like an investigation into my own ego, and it's so good that I give that to the world and they all love it. And it's like it's like that's, as much as people like to pretend that that is what we're doing when trying to create something, I think there's elements of that that might be like, yeah, like being true to one's vision, being true to one's instincts might be a part of that. But yeah, I think like the awareness that audience exists probably is a beneficial thing and doesn't take away from whatever, from the commitment one you might have to like your own sense of vision. You know, all you're doing is just like stepping into an audience's shoes and imagining if they would like it, I guess.
Yeah. But that's hard too, because I don't. Me and Jack were talking yesterday about how there are certain songs you can turn on and you can listen, and it just feels like, yeah, this person sat down and said, what will make it on the radio?
Mm.
What's going to get the most number of people to listen to this song? And if that's how that person likes writing, or that artist or whatever, nobody specific, just like, uh, a general thing. If that's what they like to write, sure, but it just doesn't feel as good to me personally, when, as opposed to somebody sitting down trying to write something that is honest to them, hoping that it speaks to other people, but not prioritizing that, I guess. There's a difference between connection and self-promoting, maybe.
Yeah.
Is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
A different between connection and pandering.
I definitely agree.
Yeah.
But there's a question of like how you navigate that, because I would definitely agree. I don't think that the sense of an audience doesn't inform any creative decision I make about what needs to be created, but what happens next. So yes, I would say in the creative process, you can either pander or you can create according to one's vision or whatever. Then there's like that second aspect that you touched on, which is almost like more of a question of marketing. And it's like, how important is it to get what you create in front of an audience or something like that? That's something that I have a very hard time with, is like, do I bend over backwards trying to get people to receive this, or do I kind of put it in the world and accept that whatever happens organically is what happens? And I don't know. I fight with that all the time.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it's it's definitely the worst part of it for me. It's like knowing that, okay, you really should advertise this show. You really should like share your music online and make those posts and whatever else. Um, yeah, I mean that's the thing though. If you want to do it professionally, you gotta have butts in seats, and you gotta have those internet numbers up, and you get that by promoting. But
Why do you think it is the hardest part? Is the hardest part for me too. And I sometimes it's hard to explain why it sucks so bad, you know, but it just does.
yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of aspects to that, I think, for why I don't like it. Like, I don't want to just be posting about myself and, just asking people, please come to this show, please, whatever. Even though I think there is, of course, like value to be had in going to see live music for sure. But also just like, do I want to spend my time pushing stuff I've already made in people's new faces, or in people's faces, when I could be making new stuff? It's like where you spend your time and energy. Kind of like I was talking about earlier. It's like, I've got maybe 2 free hours to focus on music stuff. Do I want to sit down and use this 2 hours to write a song, or do I want to sit down and use 2 hours to pitch my songs to playlists and to try and blast out emails for future shows? And
Yeah, yeah. That I guess is another byproduct of the like sort of independent artist revolution or whatever the internet revolution that is maybe something that I wasn't aware of going into independent artistry, or maybe I was, and it's just that the landscape has changed that much. But it's like as you were talking about that, I realized like, oh yeah, what would be really helpful is if I had a team large enough, and if this thing worked well enough that as a professional that you could outsource that work instead of me or you having to be the person who manages all of those campaigns. It'd just be better to have somebody that's their responsibility, you know.
Yeah.
And you could move on to what you do, what the focus of your role in that whole picture is creativity rather than
Yeah.
marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the goal. But
Yeah.
flip side of that is, agents and stuff, I guess, want somebody who's going to reach the most number of people. So people who are writing songs just to reach the most number of people might be more attractive, or just people who are reaching the more number of people, regardless of their intentions, or what's maybe more attractive than somebody who's got smaller numbers. It really is. I mean, on the business end, is just numbers, like,
Yeah.
and it's just trying to turn a creative thing into also a business thing is, I mean, that's the struggle
Tales
for
all this
everyone.
time. Yeah.
It's just always going to be that.
Yeah. And it always has been.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
not a new. It might even be easier nowadays. It's just that it comes with more responsibilities and more things to oversee. But
the flip side of that, the beautiful thing is too, if I book a gig for myself, I'm pulling in 100%, and I've got control over a lot of things.
exactly.
So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and as some people have pointed out in conversations like these on here, like the ability to focus that shit, the ability to use, I don't know, social media or whatever to focus your efforts toward people who actually would give the most of a fuck about what you do. So you're not casting the widest net possible. Like it's so much more, in a way, so much more beneficial for me or for you to, I don't know, to the degree that we can put our effort into marketing, to market toward people who like this type of music rather than just the 800,000 people there are in Asheville or whatever, the metric, whatever the location that you're using, instead of just being non-specified. Social media does help specify who we're trying to reach,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But to not to my surprise, or maybe a little to my surprise, it sounds like your approach to songwriting is like kind of identical to mine. Especially because I keep a little journal I have a journal that's specifically dedicated to small phrases, observations, imagery, stuff like that. Specifically imagery, like a lot of heavy imagery in there. And I like your little pile of collected phrases. And it sounded like you take those from is your mind always open to those things, looking for those phrases?
Yeah, and maybe not even looking, but just, I don't
Receiving?
know. It's probably, I mean, probably on a subconscious level, I guess. Yeah, it's not like I'm always just walking around thinking like, what can I make into a song? But I think in a way I kind of am. Yeah. Um, yeah.
I feel like that's like,
I don't discriminate when or where, like,
yeah.
and which is most of the time, like, it starts on my phone. I just pull my phone out and text myself real quick, and then, in a few weeks or whatever, maybe later, I'll open up my specific open journal and just, for organization's sake, try to keep them all in one place. But yeah,
When you're talking about like kind of a lifestyle that, I don't know, that allows inspiration to be there. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. And yeah, I guess that's not like actively, it's not the same as sitting down and trying to write, because that's a very, intentional, directly focused process. But being receptive to inspiration, I think is, yeah, part of that life, part of that whole lifestyle thing that you're kind of talking about, which is pretty cool. Journaling. I'd like to know if you're willing to share what some of your journaling practices are.
I don't really journal.
No,
I
but you
used
keep
to.
a journal for writing
I mean,
stuff.
it's literally just a bunch of notebooks, with like those words and collected phrases and lines and
Yeah.
whatever. I don't sit down and like have like a daily diary or journal thing. Maybe I probably should, because again, if nothing else, it's just like it just works those muscles of writing, and it's one more thing to write. Yeah, I don't really journal.
Do you do you have a specific kind of notebook that that you use for productivity?
Not really. I think I probably gravitate more towards like the spiral bounds,
Okay.
just because they're easier to flip and work with.
It's a little more college. A little
Yeah,
more.
I think so. Well, yeah. Plus, also that's what I used for all my college courses, and a lot of class time was spent not paying attention and working on songs.
Hell yeah.
And maybe in the passage we're discussing or reading, somebody mentions like somebody references a movie or whatever, and I write that movie down, and maybe I watch that movie later, and there's a line that I think is fun, and I can try and incorporate that into a song
Mm.
somewhere. And so, yeah, that's where those spiral bounds I think come, because I just have spent a lot of time writing in those, even when I shouldn't have been writing. Uh, but I've got like a little like leathered bound like Moleskine notebook that I have a bunch of phrases in. I'm a manic list maker, and like I have
I am
like
too, man.
yeah, like sitting in class just trying to figure out a track list and whatnot, and being like, all right, I need to work on some songs. What songs am I currently working on? Just writing out all the titles to the songs that I'm working through, just to be like, let's pick something from this list to work on. And I'm the same way with like organizing my phrases. I was like, I got to get all these text memos down. And so I bought another notebook identical to this one notebook that originally started as that, but then had like work notes in it and everything else. And, so now I'm like, this is just the phrase collecting notebook. And I'm, pull out irrelevant notes from the other one and take those over to this one. And it's just crazy stuff.
Dude,
Crazy stuff that maybe is like self-deception, maybe, where I'm trying to make myself feel like I'm being productive even if I'm not.
there could be, but it's so
Mixed with
funny
mental illness or something.
that I mean, you just described aspects of my life so specifically, like to a T, and how I function and what I've been. And I remember, like, for example, in high school, I don't know how it happened, but this compulsion to make lists was born. And I had like a legal pad with yellow paper, and I just started making list after list after list. It was like movies that I want to see, books that I want to read, books or movies that I have seen or read, top 100 movies, and then it would like other categories like things I want to do, places I want to go, just like list after list after list after list. And I remember one day I got to school and like went into my bag to find that notebook, and it wasn't there anymore. I believe what happened was I like set it on my car as I was leaving to go to school, and maybe it just fell off my car and disappeared. And I was like heartbroken.
Yeah.
I was like betrayed by the world, and I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know if I can even act on this compulsion anymore. And I didn't for a long time, but have realized only recently that I make lists and organize lists all the fucking time. And like I'm always operating off of them in some kind of way. And even the way that I journal, like I have a chaos journal that's pretty much, I think, fits the description of what you use the spirals for. Like it's just kind of filtration. Everything goes in there. I'm reminding myself of things. I'm like learning things, and it's active. It's sort of a reflection of where my brain is. But then I like off of that, like branches off of that journal. I've got the one for imagery. I've got one for organizing songs and recording projects. I've got some that are just like specific to like specific work entities, that are just like I don't touch this notebook unless it's for my one of my day job type things or whatever. And the list compulsion is something that puzzles me. I don't know what that's all about and like what my relationship with lists is. But I wonder, there's a part of me that wonders sometimes if it is that it's like a form of productivity that's here, and doesn't require me to like take further action.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like the nice tangible element of it too. Like I like having physical media, books, CDs, vinyl, Blu-ray discs, even though I can recognize, like, I travel with like 4 books whenever I go somewhere because I'm like, I'm reading this right now, but I'm also picking this one up. And what if I only have like a few minutes? I can pick this smaller collection up or whatever. It's like, just get a Kindle. But, and like, I have like the Blu-rays, like the digital cards backed up. Like, why do I need to take up shelf space? And same thing with like lists. I still make like, I pull out a sheet of notebook paper before I go to the grocery store and I write out what I need. And my roommate or my girlfriend or whoever, they make fun of me for walking into the grocery store with a list. But it's like, here's a thing I can hold and focus and stick to the mission. And, I'm not pulling it up on my phone and getting distracted by the 50 billion things that come through that. Like,
Yep.
I don't know. It's just, it does. There's an immediate sort of like gratification with the productivity, and like you feel like you're working with something when you have like the book that you're turning pages and you have the list that you're marking off as you go. Like, yeah, I don't know.
I like it better in every way, man. And with books especially, I get it, and I like this. I understand why the simplicity of like a Kindle would work, especially a Kindle, because it's not a lit up screen or whatever. But I like having a bookshelf. I like having it there, and I like the physical aspect of sort of turning a page, like having a bookmark in there, and it's showing me where I left off. And it just, I don't know, it feels more 3D, and I guess I kind of like 3D life compared to everything being kind of flattened.
Yeah,
I don't really want everything to be flattened. Yeah. I like space being taken up a little bit.
For sure. Yeah, well, that's my thing too. Is that like I'm moving apartments at the end of the summer, and I'll be moving in with my girlfriend too. And there's the aspect of just like wanting to minimize stuff as much as possible, and that also just makes me feel more freed up mentally when I don't have just a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it's like, I can't get rid of this book, like I can't get rid of this movie, like, it's just that weird dichotomy of
minimalism and ownership.
Yeah, minimalism and also sentimentality maybe.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah, in high school we used to like annotate the books we were reading in like our English classes and whatnot, and I got really big into like circling phrases and whatever else, and writing notes on the side that if I were to reread and like or whatever, like it enhances the understanding the text for me, but also circling and writing down phrases and stuff in this book that I think, oh, maybe this makes me feel something. Maybe I can throw that in a song somewhere. But then it got to the point where I was like, I can't just like circle back through these books. Like I can't just carry these books around when I'm writing. So I had like a notebook in college where I was like, all right, I'd finish reading the book and I'd go back and look at the things that I'd underline and I'd put them all in this notebook, and I'd be like, page 88, this line is where it came from. Because also I don't want to end up plagiarizing if I throw something in a song. Like I want to, throw my own sort of spin on it and stuff, and like maybe not even take that direct thing, but take the feeling that line gave me and knowing where it came from. Just crazy. Like
that is detailed.
Madness.
Yeah.
Just madness. I remember when I was like early writing my Mammal's Angel album that I put out last summer, in the early stages, and I was still trying to figure out which songs would go on that album, and most of them not even finished. It's to the point where I was like, all right, I'd put the title of whatever song I was trying to write on top of a piece of paper, and then I'm cycling through my pile of words and phrases and be like, this phrase kind of lines up with like the feeling that this idea is giving me. So maybe I'll, I just had a notebook called like trigger phrases almost, which sounds like something that could get you in trouble. But trigger isn't like... trigger isn't like inspiration, like, okay, this feeling from this word or this line syncs up with this feeling from this melody and chorus and idea. And so I'd like would organize certain lists into like certain phrases in a whole list under this song or whatever. And a few of them, like, it worked. It's, there's like maybe 20 songs in there where I just had like a whole big like list of different lines synthesized from my whole pile of notebooks and just crazy, crazy stuff. Like madman. Like should probably have medication for that, but instead I just got a couple of songs out of it, and it's just this weird around my elbow to get to my ear method that I need to simplify, but also it works. It works sometimes.
That's what I'm sitting here thinking about. Is sort of just like, it sounds like this is just a part of your, I don't know, the way that you function and the way that you collect inspiration in the world. And I'm also obviously comparing it to my own self. Like, I'm noticing where I relate and stuff. And I'm just like, like, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's okay to, like, it's not like, because you can't collect humans and you can't collect every word. And, it's easy to forget things. And especially if things are impactful and you kind of want to give them a space in your life to just really let them remain impactful and let them stay with you. Maybe it just makes good sense to kind of have some kind of system to collect those things, and you can collect them on paper instead of whatever. And I've lost all sorts of digital stuff too. I used to, in my old, before I got this phone, I had a long list of fake band names in my phone, and they were great. And I mean, it was probably like 100 of them, and I didn't remember to snag that when I got a new phone, and it's just gone. And if that were on paper, there's a chance I'd still have it. I could put it on top of my car and drive away and it disappear. But, in my mind, it's safe. It's more safe and more memorable if it's kind of like documented that way.
Yeah. Man, I got a new phone at the very start of this year, and the previous phone I had had since the summer of 2017. And it was just loaded up full of like my notes app had all sorts of things in it. And my like voice memo app had all sorts of like, just because I'll do that sometimes. If I just am driving and I have like a very specific melody or something that I want to remember, I'll just pull it out, sing it into my phone or whatever, and usually put it away and not come back to it. Like, I'll just forget it's there, which that's like my audio stack of notebooks is what that is, that I'll sit down and fish through that. But anyways, the phone was full of all this stuff. And like I dragged my feet like for a while getting like the new phone activated, because I was just like anxious about losing that stuff and just trying to make sure I had it all squared away and backed up. And then like, went to the AT&T store for them to swap it over, and they couldn't get like any of my, I lost a bunch of apps that I had to just go back and re-download, and like I lost a good bit of contacts, but I made sure that they got like my audio files over, and I had already made sure that I had transcribed everything that I felt was worth keeping as far as like the the text and notes and stuff. But that's another thing, like, just because the digital things, something totally out of your control happens and the cloud is down and you lost everything.
Yep.
Whereas like I can grab my stack of notebooks in a fire and just
run out
with that.
Yeah, man. I think I was walking with her the other morning thinking, I'm tired of my phone being a sort of library of all these things, because I've done the same thing. And not that long ago, I guess it was when I switched over phones, I had to drop like 400 audio files onto my computer. And then I was like, well, now I've got all these files, I'm going to actually sort through these. And I organized. We do sound insane. I went through all of them and said, okay, here's one category is song ideas that are pretty decent. One category is these are early stages of songs that I finally did right. One category is song finish stuff, which I just deleted because they were just whatever, shit that I didn't need to keep. Maybe there were some other ones, like some of them were talking, things like that, like voice memos. So I organized everything, put them away, and then I realized a couple months later, I'm like kind of going back into the same practice. I'm like storing things on my phone, and I want to stop using the phone as storage at all. I think I want to try to figure out every week, like how to drop everything, every photo, every audio file, everything that I put into the phone. Just go ahead and drop it and store things that are going to be stored on the computer, so that because I don't know, there's something about that bothers me. There's something about the space on the phone representing, I don't know, stagnation, and I just
Yeah.
don't want it to be
Sure.
cluttered like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want it to be fresh and up to date. It feels like a list gone wrong, I guess, if the phone gets too cluttered.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's good for like catching things in the moment for me, but like I can't let it live there.
Yeah, it's not
It'll
productive.
disappear because
Exactly.
yeah,
And there's like I found so many good compositions, on from the phone
sure.
that in that moment I was like, oh, this is fucking great. But yeah, if you lose them, if you never go back and visit them because there's 500, there's 500 audio files to sort through, and you don't know where it is, and you didn't name it, then
Uh
it's just you're not helping yourself at all. So I think just figuring out how to use the phone in a productive way is necessary at this
yeah,
stage, at least for me.
absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
do you do any? Another guest I had on the podcast actually journaled on his phone. Do you do any writing on the phone?
Not really.
I can't do any.
I don't yeah, I don't yeah, I can't. I have to have a pen cuz I can't like I mean with the phone I can't go and like and I can text it out and I'll do that in a pinch where like I have like maybe a verse that I don't have a pen or paper near me and like I need to get this verse down now or else I'll forget it in 10 minutes. And I'll write, maybe within a line that I'm typing, I'll put parentheticals of like an alternative idea or whatever, but I can't annotate like I can with paper. I
Yeah.
can't, cuz things don't just come out straight. Like I have notes as I'm writing of things to think about and like
Scribbles
kind
and
of yeah
stuff.
just scribbling and like editing as I go and things to think about on my second pass through it and yeah
That's so real. Yeah.
I
Yeah, I hadn't
can't
thought
do it on a
about that.
phone.
You can't do that.
It's
Yeah.
not as maybe you can but it just doesn't work for me and
I'm
it's
with you.
not as clear and easy.
So, can you give me some insider info on your latest release, the most recent album that you've put out?
Sure, what
All
do
right.
you
Also, do you have anything pending right now, or is your
I'm just
recent
I'm
one?
just writing. I've got I mean I like the idea of an album. Like I want to write songs within the context of an album and I want them all to fit together. So there's a lot of, I'm admittedly a slow writer. So when I do finish a song, if it doesn't fit, I'll just leave that as a standalone song and maybe I probably don't record it because recording takes time and money. So I just have songs that I'll play live and I continue trying to write for an album. So I've got a lot of standalone songs that I'll perform out and about. Um, and some of those a lot of them are co-writes that I think maybe I could put in an EP just to have something to put out.
Mm-hmm.
But right now I'm just trying to write for the next album and just trying to figure out how and if the songs I'm working on fit together. And, if they don't, I'll just wait until songs I write do.
I write albums as well, and what that means for me is something like whenever I'm sort of in a writing phase in life, that the songs I seem to write during that time, they do have certain shit in common. Like they'll have imagery they share. And I've often noticed that sometimes like a certain image I've never used before will just find its way into multiple songs, and I'll be like, well, clearly that's a relationship between the songs. They are all talking about. There's multiple songs that mention a cherry tree for some reason, or
Mm-hmm.
there's multiple songs that mention rust or something, and different stuff like that, or different phrases. But I noticed that, like, I just embarked on this project that's a little different. That I was like trying to do something new and decided, okay, maybe I'll try to just choose from all the songs I've ever written. I'll just like pick a bunch of them and record them. And I've done this and I like the recordings, But something I'm keenly aware of is that it breaks this thing in my head that is like looking for them to have shit in common, and they just don't. They're from all over. They're from like the last 15 years of writing songs, and they just don't. They don't have that thread that binds them. What do you think is to you important about the idea of this thread that binds them? This idea that they like have commonality, and what is the difference between writing an album versus writing a song at a time?
I mean, that's hard because that's also something I just figure out as I go. It's like, this most recent album, a lot of the songs were written together, but one song I started in 2017, and I guess it was 2018. I started in summer of 2018. By the end of it, summer it was finished. To the latest one was March 2022, and then some of those songs, one of them I started in 2018 and didn't finish the lyric until 2022, like the last recording session for it. So it's something that it all just kind of pieces itself together. Sort of like I said earlier, it's like I'll write the songs and figure out which one, whether or not they fit together, and if they do. I think this Mammal's Angel album, sort of one of the one of the running themes through it, I feel like is a sense of manic loneliness, which dives back to, I think, sort of a need to connect, and a big kind of running theme, I guess, through that album is it's a lot of the songs are told from like the perspective of bad people, maybe selfish people.
Real people?
No, I mean,
Just characters that you're
yeah, that's
okay.
the thing I think about. Uh, the Yeah, getting away from that confessional writing, but still being honest. For me, like my songs are honest when the feeling is honest. That and which feeling alone is a very real feeling for me. That was a really hard one to have for a long time. But the stories around that aren't always factual to my life or anyone else's life. It's just trying to capture the honest feeling. And then you embellish it with a good narrative.
You stretch it out. You figure out where the ends are. You
Yeah,
figure out what's real about it.
yeah, but that's like one of those things. I didn't sit down to write an album with that theme in mind.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where I just noticed, okay, 3 or 4 of these songs all kind of fit together with that idea. Now let's keep rolling with it. And maybe I've got a title and a melody in my notebook of a song that I'm trying to work through, and maybe I approach it now with that perspective, and it unlocks something, and I'm able to finish the song with those thoughts and feelings in mind. And then it pops on the album, or maybe not.
Is there anything visual about this process for you? Is there anything that you see? You know what I mean?
What do you mean?
Like, okay, you like when an album vision starts to form, I do associate it with a color. Sometimes I'll kind of have an idea for what I think a album cover might start to look like. And also sometimes when I'm writing the songs, I think there's a question of, I mean, I write very visually. I write a lot of imagery into the songs,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I also wonder if you picture any of these characters or if picturing them is unimportant to the process.
Yeah, I don't, as far as the synesthesia sort of thing where like sounds have colors, I don't have that. So I'm not thinking it's not like there's a camera filter over songs in my head as I'm writing, but it is very important, I think, to have strong images. And so I try to have like strong tactile images in my songs, and then trying to figure out maybe how those images might connect. Like this song on my album Motorhome Blues, like in the first couple of verses, there's the image of Winnebago. There's a was it Winnebago resting in the front lawn like a thrush come home to roost, and then on the second half of that song, gold Dotson rusting in the backyard. And so you've got images of like vehicles. The first one is like resting, peaceful, positive connotation. The second one is rusting, negative connotation. And so it's like how does the image serve the message or the mood or whatever is important, but also just having the image
You said it's
is important too.
You said it's important again. What do you think is important compared to the alternative? You know what I mean?
It gives you some, going back to what you said about having the outside world, it gives the listener, I think, something very specific. It gives them something they can relate to. It's something that feels real, and makes it maybe a little more inviting to the song. I think it's like, it's almost like an anchor, I think. Having like hard images, it helps you, it puts you in the setting, and then you're there to experience maybe the more ethereal things like emotion, within that song. But if it's all just like abstract stuff, it, not saying it doesn't work, but it doesn't work for me.
And I'm totally with you, man.
Yeah.
Totally with you. I think this is an area where songwriting starts to get close to like screenwriting or like filmmaking in a way.
Yeah, that's funny because like I did like I got really into like movies.
Yeah.
And like I still am, but like when I was like writing this album, just like it was inspired almost as much as like how a movie sets a feeling and tells a story, as much as like a song or an album or whatever. Like just having those visual elements is fascinating. But also like I did a cool thing. My buddy Seth Grant, he's a filmmaker that I got to know at App State. We did a couple of music videos together, and I got to sit down and like storyboard stuff for like how like we could come up with like music videos for like my songs, and interpreting things, not even like reenacting the stories that happen in the songs, but figuring out how to line up these songs with like visual elements and stuff. And like we didn't get to make all of the ones we planned, but we did some cool ones. And like the gold Dotson rustin' in the backyard from the Motorhome Blues song, we did like a little stop motion portion of a video for my song Tuesday, and it's about sort of in the song, the end of the verse is about driving through the rain. So in that video I had like a little Matchbox 1968 gold Datsun that like maybe nobody noticed, or like I don't expect anybody to sit down and like be like connecting the dots, like there's not a Chris McGinnis fan theory thing out there or whatever, but that sort of stuff for like is just fun for me. It's like, and maybe anybody who maybe if somebody notices that, it's like a fun little thing for them too.
Absolutely.
But it's just those little like it's just a fun thing, a fun way to recognize how can I interconnect these things even more.
Yep.
And at that point, like across mediums with the video referencing a song, because it's not like I say gold Dotson in the song from the video, but it's there. Yeah.
I love it.
Just, weird stuff that kind of connects as you go. And it's not even like, it's not even like it's always intentional. That's the thing too. It's like I get like anxious sometimes about not being able to do something that I feel was as good as what I've already done. And I do feel like this album that I put out is the best thing I've put out of all my things. And like, I personally feel like it's going to be hard to do something better than what I've done. I keep trying though. Like, you got to keep trying, but it is like, weird little things like that where I just feel like the stars aligned and I just got lucky.
That's so
you know?
interesting. A good friend of mine talks a lot about that, about the importance of doing, like, outdoing the last thing, and that thought never crosses my mind. And like,
Yeah. It probably, I mean, I don't know if it's a good thought. It probably shouldn't. Like, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get to with myself. It's like, as long as I feel like what I'm doing is true to what I want to do and that it's good and honest and it is something I'm happy with and, it is fulfilling, I don't think you should compare the works. But also, I'm just so, I don't know. I'm just anxious. It's just a negative part of my headspace.
I imagine I imagine it is a part of the path toward success as well. Like, I imagine successful people care about climbing a sort
Hmm.
of hierarchical ladder in a similar way that is making progress toward the grand vision or something. But and it's not like I don't have a competitive spirit, because I do. It's not like I don't want to pursue the mountain, because I do. But I don't. Yeah, I don't feel as though I'm competing currently with anything I've released so far. I feel
Yeah.
like they're all the works are kind of equal in a way. I just, it never occurs to me to feel
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Before I forget, I wanted to mention, about sort of the Easter egg. Like, I like that. I really like being able, I think, as musicians, to extend the creativity of the music into realms that are even more visual than the music. And I think I didn't used to have a language, I don't think, for why imagery in songs was so important, but I think you kind of captured it with everything you just said. Uh, and I think it does compare in a way where it's sort of like what I've heard a lot of people talk about film and say, something that's so great about film is, unlike with theater, unlike with other art forms, if you write a screenplay that takes place in Spain, you can actually go to Spain or somewhere that looks like Spain. You can take the viewer to that place. And I think that's what we're doing with songwriting too, especially visual
Yeah.
songwriting, like kind
Yeah.
of taking them to the reality of the song. And then, yeah, like you said, being able to kind of take that into the realm of expanding that into something even more visual is it's just super fucking exciting. It's just super
Yeah.
cool to be able to do that. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's like, I think that goes back to just like maybe why I just loved reading when I was a little kid and why I loved writing was because you could go places without going anywhere,
Yeah.
you know, and it's magical.
I just read the Tao, and he Tao, what's it called? Tao to Zay. I can't remember what his name is, but that was a quote I remember hearing in the book, was something like, "The wise man can travel the whole world without ever leaving his home," or something like that. You also made me remember that years ago I recorded. I don't know why we chose to do this instead of an original song, but one of my first successful video projects. It was almost like a short film. I recorded a cover of "Hallelujah" by Leonard Cohen, and we made a little thing out of that. And one of the scenes, like, it followed this relationship as it blossomed and sort of fell apart and all this stuff. And this scene where this girl was leaving. She was actually right over here. She walks over here and grabs a stack of records and like all her other belongings, and she's taking them out of the house with her. And as she turns to walk out of the house, she turns, and the record that she's holding that you can see is songs by Leonard Cohen. And you can just see his face kind of like looking at you. And I always loved that. I always loved that little moment that connected
Yeah.
this project to that one.
Yeah. Huh.
Just
Yeah. That's
fun
fun.
shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you see yourself
And
doing more with video
I
stuff?
hope so. I got really lucky because we were just college students who had access to expensive equipment and people
Yeah.
who needed project hours. So like, and I was living at home and not having to worry about all sorts of bills. So I had like money from my job that I could just throw into my music. It's
Mm.
the next album is gonna be a lot more low budget out of necessity, and so the next video, if I have one, will probably be a lot more low budget.
Mm.
Unless we can just keep sweet talking people. That's the thing. I've been very lucky just to have people I like, artists I respect, in my circle who also like and respect what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I've been very fortunate just to have a lot of good people, talented people who have helped me realize sort of my art in ways that I couldn't on my own.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think I just realized, and oblivious to the time, where we should wrap soon.
Okay.
So my last question probably will be about, I mean, so you've already told me a little bit about what's on the horizon, and you just kind of talked a bit about how that will work budget wise and relationships. I want to just take the opportunity to get a little bit of a glimpse, as I hinted at before, into your most recent release. So I'm just wondering, I guess if we can, I guess since we're going to do this in a time sacrificing way, since other folks are here.
I'm so long-winded. I'm sorry.
No, you're not. It's great. It's great. I feel like I'm really enjoying the conversation we had. I wish we could talk for like 3 hours. So I guess my last question would just be about, like, I wonder if you could take your most recent release and maybe pick one or two songs to give people a little bit of insight, a little behind the scenes about maybe the where some of these songs might have come from, just so they can visit your music, take a look at it, and kind of understand a little bit of it as they do so.
Okay. Mammal's Angels. It's, Mammal's Angel is the album. Mammal's Angels is the song. I got that from that campground I mentioned that I worked at. There was, it was like a travel trailer tent sort of thing in the Linville Gorge. And we had certain campsites that were off limits, and there was like an older woman there who really, really wanted one of those off limit campsites. And she would always ask, she knew she couldn't have it, but she would always ask, like an employee, hey, could I go here? Hoping that she would be told yes, so that when somebody came and told her she couldn't be there, she would be able to be like, I was told I could be there. But the thing is, it was always me that she asked. She just didn't remember. So she would just approach me and ask me about this campsite, trying to get me to slip up. And every time I'd be like, no, you can't have that. And anyways, she, had like 12 grandkids, and they were all rotten. She would bring 6 youngest ones camping one weekend, 6 oldest ones camping one weekend, because you just can't handle all 12 at once. And just a rotten family top to bottom. And one day she's like standing there asking me the question. We're going through the charade, and she's got a t-shirt on that has like 12 little stick figures, and underneath the stick figures are the names of all her rotten grandchildren. And it says Mammal's Angels on top of the shirt.
Love it.
And I just thought, you know what? That is just one of those moments where I was like, hey, Mammal's Angels, that can be something. And you know what, sure enough, I made it a band, I made it a song, I made it an album, I made it my Instagram handle, I put it on a trucker hat that you can buy at my shows. Like, that's where that song came from.
Damn.
And it, the musical aspects of it just came from listening to, I don't know, just Randy Newman and CCR, and like just, sort of classic roots rock sort of songs. And, I was finally able to pair a verse and a chorus with like the music. That is just a lyric and music pairing that worked out from a story that's like loosely rooted in that.
That's so fun.
And then what's another one? Motorhome Blues, I guess, is a similar one, where I tell people like this song was inspired by this story, but I actually like kind of forgot that it happened until after I wrote the song. So maybe like it was subconsciously, but I didn't sit down and write it consciously based off of this. But there's a couple there who they were staying. Well, the husband was staying a little longer than he thought he would, because halfway like through the trip, him and his wife kind of got into an argument. And she took the car and went back home, and he was just having to stay in our campground in his motorhome, trying to figure out his situation. And then he went out one afternoon. He like just went out to the store, came back later, and it was an empty lot. And it turns out when he was gone, she came and stole the camper.
Jesus Christ.
And so from that, Also based off of Shiloh by Bobby Ann Mason, if you're familiar. It's a
Uh-uh.
short story, really good short story about like a couple just kind of silently falling apart. And the what I mentioned, the vehicle image like kind of flipping. It was inspired by how at the early part of the story the truck driving husband looks out and sees his truck resting and is like comfortable that he's finally back home, and then later on he sees all the dents and blemishes and ugliness of that truck as his situation has soured. That was an element that I took for that song, and also with this story of a woman stealing this camper. Went into Motorhome Blues. Those are probably the two most direct and tangible stories paired with songs I think that I have. And
I
thank
love
God
it.
I had that grunt job where I
Yeah.
was just, running this campground with my friends and family and was able to get these weird characters in my life that became stories.
I sometimes I think of the observational practice of songwriting as being a collector of life in a
Mm-hmm.
way, and I
Mm-hmm.
imagine other writers are very similar. And that's what I love about those examples you just gave, is it's sort of like collecting the artifacts of humanity just in language form, instead of whatever, instead of in photograph or in fossils or whatever the fuck. It's you're capturing really intimate moments, and giving them a whole new life, and I think that's sick as fuck.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's fun. That's, the world for all its horribleness is a very interesting place. We're all experiencing it together.
Yeah.
you know, so it's fun to be able to capture that inside of a melody for a minute and a half to 6.5 minutes, or I write songs of all lengths, but it's fun to be able to collect life like that.
Absolutely, man. Well, like I say, I mean, I relating to you as a songwriter, I wish we could talk for longer. I'll
For
go ahead and
sure.
wrap us up for today, but really enjoyed getting to know you, and I hope that
Likewise, man.
hope we'll stay
Yeah, we don't
doing things
always have
like
to talk
this.
just on a podcast.
Yeah,
Now
exactly.
I've got a new friend.
Exactly. Yes, we'll hopefully be in each other's
For
locations
sure.
more than once.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for the time and for the conversation.
Likewise, man. Thank you.